Brian Pillman is a guy that you had a number of matches with over your career. Any thoughts on him?
Yeah, Brian was the first night we met Brian. Jim Ross came to Johnny Ace and I. We were in West Palm Beach, Florida, and said now I had heard Brian's name, because as you're coming up in the business, the rookies of the year that year was, I think Brian Pillman was the one that won that year. Steve Cox, my name was in there. So there was always this connection of like our names being thrown in together, but I'd never met him. And Jim Ross came and said, "There's a kid coming in from Canada. His name's Brian Pillman, and can he jump in with you guys?" So we said, "Sure." And we got to the TV that night. It was a TV tape. It must have been a TV taping. And went back to the hotel. We were going to go over to the Dollhouse, and I think it's called the Dollhouse in West Palm Beach. We got a cab, and we get in the cab, and he starts making some really overtly rude comments to the taxi driver. And at first I thought he was like trying to impress me and Johnny. I would come to find out later that was just Brian's personality. That was Brian's way of just sort of meandering through the world. I finally said, like, whispered to him, like, "Hey, kayfabe, this guy could shoot." It's more like midnight. This guy could shoot us and say we tried to rob him or something. But Brian, looking at Brian's whole life story, and that most fans are familiar with it. Throat cancer when he was an infant. Was always on the smaller side, but over excelled. Somebody I'm sure along the way told him he'd never play in the NFL. Well, he would prove him wrong. Same thing with wrestling. He'd prove him wrong. And I think that pretty much summarizes Brian's life. There was always these hurdles put in front of him, comments made. People, you can't be that because, and he took that as I'll show you. I found him as a talent to be amazing to work with. We'd had like a singles match when we were kids in the NWA, but later in ECW when he came in as the loose cannon, I had already been that heel there in ECW, and Brian never spoke to before like, "Hey, let's go out and do this or that." It was, let's just go out and wing it. Because then it becomes more natural, the flow back and forth. If you know your character and I know my character, we don't need to pre-plan lines or, where you're going to stand or I'll be standing. And we got into it out there at ringside, and he wanted me to grab it. So I grabbed the chair, and in ECW, you grab the chair, you swung it. You didn't play around with those things. And I start to swing this chair, and he reaches behind him and grabs an infant, a baby in the front row, and puts the baby in front. I'm swinging the chair full blast. Oh, gee. Almost, I would have killed the kids, And I said to him after, "What the fuck?" And he goes, "It worked, didn't it?" I said, "Well, thank God I didn't kill the kid." That was Brian. He was always pushing that envelope, but you go back and you watch that footage, and you can't turn away from it. He was so magnetic to watch because of that pushing the envelope. The person, unless he was different with other people than he was with me, you never quite knew what Brian was going to do or say out there in front of camera, as long as you were ready to bounce off of it and play off of it. I think the business, like the stuff we talked about earlier with AEW, a lot of those kids could learn an awful lot by watching someone like a Brian Pillman. It was just amazingly magnetic to watch.
And that just reminds me that NXT, supposedly they do a full practice on the Tuesday, and like a moment like that can't be practiced because spur of the moment and real.
Right.
Your reaction is real too.
Yeah, absolutely. It had to be. Yeah. And if I every time I do a seminar, I tell kids this, and I explain ad nauseum, part to the point of boredom, as to why you shouldn't pre-plan everything. We've all been in the dressing rooms, and what are the kids? We lock up. You do this, and I'll take this, and then you do this, and they lay literally everything out. And so what I watch when I'm watching kids in the ring today is, again, just slack-jawed at the athleticism, but they look like kids trying to remember what's coming next, as opposed to just going out there and being that character, which to me was always the fun part. Especially as the heel, to be able to go out there and pick somebody out in that audience, or just go at it with them and have that back and forth that, like you said, makes it real and believable.